My father-in-law stood at the podium and announced he had purchased our family business. Everyone applauded. He looked directly at me and said, "Your days here are numbered." I walked to the podium, smiled, and handed him a folder. Some people in my family still think I went too far. After everything you are about to hear, I want to know what you think. The anniversary party was in the main event hall at the Riverside Hotel. 83 people. White tablecloths. A string quartet playing something soft in the corner. My husband's hand was on my knee under the table, steady pressure. He knew. I had told him what I was going to do. He said, "Are you sure?" I said yes. The folder was leather, dark brown. I had carried it in my purse for 6 weeks, waiting for the right moment. When Richard stood up and made his announcement, I knew that moment had arrived. Let me tell you how we got here. I met David when I was 24. He was 26. We were both working at a commercial real estate firm downtown. I was an analyst. He was in acquisitions. We got coffee one morning and talked for 3 hours. 6 months later, we were engaged. His family owned a logistics company. Warehousing, distribution, freight coordination. It had been in the family for 50 years, started by David's grandfather in the back of a garage. By the time I met David, it was pulling in about $8 million a year in revenue. I met Richard and Alina at a Sunday dinner 2 weeks after David proposed. Alina opened the door. She looked at my dress. It was from Target. She said, "Oh, how nice." The way you say something is nice when it is absolutely not nice. She led me into the dining room. Richard was at the head of the table. He shook my hand. He had a grip that lasted 2 seconds too long. A test. David's sister, Bethany, was already seated. She worked in marketing at the family company. She looked me up and down and said, "David said you do something with spreadsheets." I was a financial analyst. I built projection models for commercial property acquisitions. I had closed 2 deals that quarter worth a combined $12 million. I said, "Something like that." Richard asked what my father did. I said he was a high school teacher, history. He had passed away when I was 19. Richard nodded slowly. He said, "Education is important. The way you agree with something to move past it." Alina asked where I went to college. I said state. She said, "Oh, David went to Dartmouth." I knew. David had told me. I smiled and said it was a great school. Bethany asked if I had student loans. I did, $41,000. I was paying them down aggressively. I said yes. She said that must be hard. She had a diamond tennis bracelet. Her father had paid for Dartmouth. No loans. Dinner was prime rib. Alina made a point of saying it was from a specialty butcher. $28 a pound. I ate and nodded and answered questions. Richard asked if I planned to keep working after the wedding. I said yes. He said, "Well, we will see how you feel once you settle in." David squeezed my hand under the table. After dinner, Richard pulled David aside. I heard him through the door. He said, "She seems sweet. A little rough around the edges, but that can be smoothed out." I stood in the hallway and looked at a photograph on the wall. The whole family at some resort. Everyone in white linen. Everyone smiling. I thought about the folder I would one day hand to Richard. I did not know what would be in it yet, but I knew, standing in that hallway, that there would be a folder. We got married 4 months later. Small ceremony. David wanted it that way. I did too. Alina cried during the vows. I thought it was sweet. David told me later she had cried because she thought he was making a mistake. We moved into a small house. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom. It needed work. The kitchen cabinets did not close all the way. The water heater made a sound like a dying animal. David said we would fix it up together. We did. I learned how to grout tile on YouTube. I kept working. David joined the family business officially 6 months after the wedding. Richard made him a manager in operations. Bethany was already director of marketing. She had been there for 3 years. At Sunday dinners, they talked about the business. Richard at the head of the table. Alina next to him. Bethany across from David. I sat and listened. They talked about a contract they lost, a vendor who was late, a warehouse lease that was coming up for renewal. I listened and ate pot roast and refilled water glasses. One night, Bethany was talking about a marketing campaign she wanted to launch. Direct mail, glossy brochures. She said it would cost about $60,000. Richard said it sounded smart. He approved it right there at the table. I had run the numbers in my head while she was talking. The target market was too broad. The message was not differentiated. The cost per acquisition would be about $400 for a service with an average lifetime value of $900. Margins too thin, it would not work. I did not say anything. 3 months later, the campaign flopped. Bethany blamed the mailing list vendor. Richard said it was a learning experience. David came home that night and said, "You knew that would not work, didn't you?" I said yes. He said, Why didn't you say something? I said they were not asking me. He said I should speak up more. I said I would think about it. I did not speak up, I watched. Richard made decisions fast, gut instinct. He trusted his experience. 50 years in the business. He had built it from nothing. He knew what worked. Except the industry was changing. E-commerce was starting to reshape logistics. Amazon was scaling warehousing in ways that would redefine the entire sector. Automation was coming. Data analytics was becoming critical. Richard did not believe in any of it. He said, "We do things the old-fashioned way. Relationships, handshakes, that is what matters." I was watching the market shift in real time. At my job, we were analyzing logistics properties. I saw the rent growth, the cap rate compression. I saw which companies were expanding and which ones were getting left behind. I started taking notes. David got promoted to director of operations 2 years after he started. Richard made the announcement at Sunday dinner. Eleanor cried again, happy tears this time. Bethany raised her glass and said, "To my brilliant baby brother." Richard looked at me and said, "You must be so proud." I said I was. He said, "Maybe one day you will come work with us too. We could always use someone to help with the books." I had a finance degree. I was running acquisition models for a $70 million portfolio. I was making $82,000 a year. I smiled and said, "Maybe one day." That night, I opened a separate bank account. I did not tell David, not because I was hiding it, but because I was not ready to explain what I was building yet. I started doing consulting work on the side, financial modeling for small businesses, projection work, feasibility studies. I charged $75 an hour. I worked nights and weekends. In 6 months, I made $11,000. I put it all in the separate account. David's family kept talking to me like I was a child learning to play with the adults. At Thanksgiving, Richard asked if I understood how tariffs worked. I had written a 12-page analysis on tariff impacts for a client 2 weeks earlier. I said I had a basic understanding. At Christmas, Bethany gave me a book called Lean In. She said, "I thought you might find this inspiring. It is about women in business." I had read it 3 years earlier. I said thank you. Eleanor pulled me aside in the kitchen. She said, "I am so glad David found someone who supports him." A man needs a soft place to land. I was landing $60,000 contracts in my sleep. I said, "He is lucky to have family who believe in him." She patted my hand. She said, "You are sweet." I went home that night and signed 2 new consulting clients. David knew I was doing side work. He thought it was a hobby, something to keep me busy. He said, "It is good you have your own thing." I did not correct him. I was making more from consulting than I was making at my day job. I was on track to clear 6 figures that year. I kept going to Sunday dinners. I kept smiling. I kept listening. Richard started talking about succession planning. He was 64. He wanted to retire in 5 years. He said David would take over as president. Bethany would stay on as head of marketing. It was decided. David came home excited. He said, "This is it. This is what I have been working toward." I said, "That is incredible." He said, "We are going to be set. The business is worth about $4 million. When Dad retires, it will be ours." I did not say anything. He said, "What are you thinking?" I said, "I am thinking you are going to be great at it." What I was actually thinking was that the business was undervalued. The real estate alone was worth more than $4 million. The client contracts, the relationships, the infrastructure. If it was run properly, optimized, modernized, it could be worth 10 times that. But Richard was running it like it was still 1975. I kept taking notes. One Sunday, Richard was talking about a warehouse property he was thinking of buying. He wanted to expand capacity. The property was listed at $1.4 million. He said it was a good deal. I had analyzed that property 3 months earlier for a different client. The roof needed replacing. The loading docks were not up to code. The zoning allowed for expansion, but the soil tests showed contamination that would cost $300,000 to remediate. At $1.4 million, it was a terrible deal. I did not say anything. Richard bought it. 6 months later, he discovered the soil issue. He spent $280,000 on remediation. He was furious. He blamed the inspector. He blamed the seller. He blamed everyone except himself for not doing proper due diligence. At Sunday dinner, he said, "You cannot trust anyone anymore. Everyone is trying to cheat you." I buttered a roll and stayed quiet. David said, "Dad, maybe we should have done more testing up front." Richard said, "I have been doing this for 50 years. I know a good property when I see one." Bethany said, "It is just bad luck." I thought about the report I had written, the one that laid out every single issue with that property, the one my client had used to walk away from the deal. I took another bite of pot roast. That night, I landed my biggest client yet, a regional developer who needed a full portfolio analysis. 18 properties. They paid me $45,000 for 3 months of work. I quit my day job 2 weeks later. David was surprised. He said, "Are you sure? That was a good job." I said I wanted to focus on consulting full-time. He said, "Can you make enough doing that?" I was already making double my previous salary. I said I thought so. He said, "Well, if it does not work out, you can always come work at the family business. Dad would find something for you." I said, "That is good to know." At the next Sunday dinner, Alina asked what I was doing for work now. I said I was doing financial consulting. She said, "Oh, so you are freelancing?" I said yes. She said, "Well, that is nice, very flexible, good for when you have children." David and I were not trying for children. We had talked about it. We both wanted to wait a few more years. I said, "It works well for now." Richard said, "If you ever need help getting clients, let me know." I know a lot of people. I had a 6-month waiting list. I said, "Thank you, I appreciate that." Bethany said, "I have a friend who does something similar. She makes little websites for people, very entrepreneurial." I had just closed a contract with a company doing $40 million a year in revenue. I said, "That sounds great." I went home and signed 3 more clients. By the end of that year, I had made $230,000. I moved it all into the separate account. I started looking at investment properties. David knew I was doing well. He did not know how well. When he asked how consulting was going, I said it was going fine. He said he was proud of me. At Sunday dinner, Richard announced the company had hit $8.2 million in revenue that year. Everyone applauded. He said it was a record. He said they were going to keep growing. I ran the numbers in my head. With proper optimization, modern logistics software, and strategic geographic expansion, the company could be doing $25 million in 3 years. But Richard would never do those things. I started buying properties, small multifamily units, duplexes, fourplexes. I bought them under an LLC, I renovated them, I rented them out. David knew I was investing. He thought it was modest, a duplex here and there. Side income. I bought 6 properties in 18 months. At Sunday dinner, Bethany announced she was engaged to a lawyer named Marcus. Richard was thrilled. He said, "Finally, someone with a real profession in the family." Marcus worked at a mid-sized firm. He made about $120,000 a year. I owned $1.8 million in real estate. I said congratulations. Alina planned the wedding. She spent $47,000. She invited 200 people. She rented out the botanical gardens. At the reception, Richard gave a toast. He said, "Bethany has always known what she wanted. She is a force of nature." "Marcus, you are a lucky man." Everyone applauded. He looked at David and me. He said, "And David, you are doing great work at the company. I am proud of you." He did not mention me. I drank my champagne and smiled. I met Ms. Evelyn 6 months later. She owned a commercial building downtown, 3 stories, brick, beautiful bones. It had been in her family for 60 years. She was 81. She wanted to sell. The building was listed at $900,000. It needed work, but the location was prime. The rental income potential was significant. I met her at the property on a Tuesday morning. She was waiting on the front steps. She had white hair and a cane and eyes that missed nothing. She said, "You are younger than I expected." I was 31. I said, "I get that a lot." She laughed. She said, "Come on, let me show you around." We walked through every floor. She told me stories about the building, the pharmacy that used to be on the 1st floor, the dentist office on the 2nd, the apartments on the 3rd where her parents had lived. She said, "I hate to let it go, but I am too old to manage it anymore. My children do not want it. They live in California." I asked questions. I took notes. I did not try to negotiate. I just listened. At the end of the tour, she said, "Why do you want this building?" I said, "Because it is a good investment, and because I think I can take care of it the way it deserves." She looked at me for a long moment. She said, "You remind me of myself at your age. Everyone told me I could not do it. I did it anyway." I bought the building for $850,000. She gave me a discount because she said she trusted me. At the closing, she pulled me aside. She said, "I do not know what you are building, but I can tell it is going to be something." She was the first person who ever said that to me. I renovated the building over 6 months. I leased the 1st floor to a coffee shop, the 2nd floor to a design firm. I converted the 3rd floor into 2 luxury apartments. The building was cash flowing $42,000 a year within 9 months. At Sunday dinner, Alina asked how my little consulting business was going. I said it was going well. Richard said, "You know, if you ever want to do something more stable, we have an opening in accounts payable." I had 4 employees by then. I said, "I will keep that in mind." David got a bonus that year, $15,000. Richard gave it to him at Sunday dinner. He made a whole speech about hard work and dedication. I had cleared $390,000 that year. I took David out to dinner to celebrate his bonus. I said I was proud of him. I meant it. He was good at his job. He cared about the people he managed. He was kind. He said, I feel like I am finally starting to prove myself. I said, you have always been worth believing in. He said, I wish my dad saw me the way you see me. I held his hand across the table. I said, he will. What I did not say was that Richard would never see David clearly because Richard only saw what he wanted to see. I kept building. I bought 2 more commercial properties. I started a property management company to handle my growing portfolio. I hired a full-time accountant. I brought on a project manager. At Sunday dinner, Bethany announced she was pregnant. Eleanor cried. Richard ordered a bottle of champagne. He said, the next generation of the family business. Marcus looked uncomfortable. He said, we have not really decided what Bethany is going to do after the baby. Richard said, she will come back, of course, we need her. Bethany said, we will figure it out. Eleanor looked at me. She said, do you and David think about children? I said, eventually. She said, you should not wait too long. It gets harder as you get older. I was 32. I said, we will keep that in mind. Richard said, when you do have kids, you will understand. Everything changes. Your priorities shift. Work becomes less important. I thought about the 12-hour days I was working, the deals I was closing, the empire I was building brick by brick while they thought I was doing freelance spreadsheets. I said, I am sure you are right. Bethany had the baby, a boy. They named him Richard, after his grandfather. Richard cried when they told him. At the hospital, Richard held the baby and said, this is what it is all about. Family, legacy, passing things down. Eleanor said, maybe you and David will be next. David looked at me. I smiled. We were not trying. I bought another building. Bethany went back to work 4 months after the baby. She was tired all the time. She snapped at people in meetings. She forgot deadlines. At Sunday dinner, she complained about how hard it was. Eleanor said, it is always hard in the beginning. You will find your rhythm. Richard said, we are lucky to have you back. 2 months later, Bethany left her laptop open during a Sunday dinner. I walked past it on my way to the bathroom. I saw an email from her to Marcus. The subject line was options. I did not read it, but I knew what it meant. 3 weeks later, Bethany announced she was stepping back from the company, part-time only. She said she wanted to focus on the baby. Richard was devastated. He said, we need you here, the business needs you. Bethany cried. She said, I am sorry. I just cannot do both. Richard looked at David. He said, I guess it is all on you now. David nodded. He said, I will handle it. That night, David came home exhausted. He said, I do not know how I am going to do all of this. I said, you will figure it out, you always do. He said, I wish we had someone else who understood the business, someone we could trust. I thought about the 16 employees I was managing, the 7 properties I was operating, the deals I was negotiating. I said, you will find someone. Richard hired an outside consultant 6 months later, a guy named Jim. He charged $8,000 a month. He did not know the logistics industry. He gave generic advice pulled from business books. At Sunday dinner, Richard praised him. He said, Jim really gets it. He is helping us modernize. Jim had suggested they start using email more. It was 2012. I kept my mouth shut. David was working 60-hour weeks. He was stressed. He was not sleeping well. Richard kept piling more on him. At Sunday dinner, Richard said, this is what leadership looks like, sacrifice. David nodded. He looked exhausted. I reached under the table and squeezed his hand. That night, I signed a contract for my biggest deal yet, a mixed-use development. I was partnering with 2 other investors. My share was $600,000. I was 33 years old. I had built a portfolio worth $4.2 million. And my father-in-law still thought I did freelance spreadsheets. Eleanor asked me to help with Thanksgiving that year. She said, I know you are not working full-time, so you probably have more flexibility. I had 3 closings scheduled that week. I said, of course, what do you need? She handed me a list. Grocery shopping, table settings, picking up the pies from the bakery. I did it all. At Thanksgiving dinner, Richard carved the turkey. He said, I am thankful for family, for this business my father started, for knowing it will continue long after I am gone. He looked at David. He said, I am thankful for my son who is going to carry this forward. He did not look at me. I thought about the empire I had built in silence. The buildings, the cash flow, the investments. I thought about the folder. I did not have it yet, but I knew it was coming. Richard announced his retirement plan at Christmas dinner. He said, I am turning 67 next month. It is time. David, the company will be yours in 18 months. David looked shocked. He said, Dad, are you sure? Richard said, I am sure, you are ready. Bethany looked upset. She said, what about me? Richard said, you can stay involved as much as you want, but David will be president. Marcus put his hand on Bethany's knee. Eleanor cried. Richard said, there is one more thing. He looked at David, then at me. He said, I'm going to need to restructure things, transfer ownership properly. I will need to bring in lawyers, accountants. Make sure everything is airtight. David said, whatever you need, Dad. Richard said, I built this company from nothing. I want to make sure it is protected. I sipped my wine. Richard said, I am also going to buy out the remaining shares. Your mother and I own 70%. There are some minority stakeholders. I want full control before I transfer it to you. David said, that makes sense. I thought about those minority stakeholders. I had seen the corporate documents once, years ago. Small percentages, early investors, people who had helped Richard get started. I wondered what he was planning to pay them. I kept quiet. 3 months later, Richard made the buyout offers. I heard about it from David. He said his dad was offering the minority shareholders 50 cents on the dollar. I said, can he do that? David said, he is saying the company is not worth what they think it is worth. He is offering them a fair market price based on current valuation. I said, and they are accepting it? David said, most of them. A couple are upset, but Dad says they do not have a choice. I thought about that. I thought about the building I had just bought. The one Ms. Evelyn had sold me for less than market value because she trusted me. I thought about the difference between a transaction and a relationship. I did not say anything to David, but I started paying closer attention. Richard completed the buyouts over 6 months. He paid out a total of $240,000 for shares that were probably worth closer to $500,000. At Sunday dinner, he said, it is all done. The company is 100% mine now. Well, mine and your mother's, and soon it will be David's. Everyone congratulated him. I thought about those minority shareholders, people who had believed in Richard 40 years ago, people who had helped him when he was starting out, people he had just squeezed out for half of what they deserved. I went home and called my attorney. Her name was Patricia Reyes. I had worked with her on 3 property acquisitions. She was sharp. She did not waste time. I said, I need you to explain something to me. She said, go ahead. I asked her about minority shareholder rights, about buyout provisions, about fair market value. She explained it all. She said, why are you asking? I said, just curious about a situation I heard about. She said, if you ever need help with something like this, you call me first. Don't try to handle it yourself. I said I would remember that. I hung up and sat in my office for a long time. I thought about Richard, about the way he had dismissed me for 9 years, about the way he had underpaid people who had trusted him, about the way he ran the company like it was still the 1970s. I thought about David, about how hard he was working, about how much he wanted his father's approval. I thought about the folder. I knew what was going to be in it now. David came home late that night. He said, Dad wants to have a formal transition meeting next week. He is going to go over everything, the financials, the client relationships, the operations. I said, that is good. He said, I am nervous. I said, you are going to be great. He said, I hope so. I held him. I said, I know so. What I did not say was that I was already working on something that would change everything. I had 18 months until Richard retired. I had 18 months to build the folder. I got to work. I started meeting with Patricia Reyes every other Tuesday. We met at her office, 23rd floor, glass walls. She always had coffee ready. Black, no sugar, she remembered. The first meeting, I laid it out. Everything I had built, everything I owned, everything Richard did not know about. She leaned back in her chair. How long have you been planning this? I told her I had not been planning anything. I had just been building, but now I needed to make sure it stayed mine. She pulled out a legal pad. Walk me through your assets. I did, the properties, the LLC structures, the separate accounts, the investments. She took notes. When I finished, she looked up. You understand what you have here? I asked what she meant. You have built something bigger than his company. You have done it quietly. You have done it right. She tapped her pen on the pad. But if David is inheriting his father's business, there could be complications. Community property, marital assets, you need to protect this. I asked how. She spent an hour explaining. Separate property documentation, pre-existing asset establishment, clear paper trails showing acquisition before certain dates, proper corporate structures. I took notes. She asked if David knew the full scope. I told her he knew some, not everything. She looked at me for a long moment. You are going to have to tell him eventually. I knew that, I just was not ready yet. She wrote something down. I am going to draft some documents, retroactive protection, just in case. I asked in case of what? In case things get messy. I signed the retainer that afternoon, $15,000. I went back to work. The close calls started small. David came home one Tuesday evening. I was in the office. He knocked on the door. Hey, can I ask you something? I closed my laptop. Of course. Mom was asking about what you do all day. I realized I do not actually know how to explain it. I smiled. I do financial consulting, analysis work, projections. Right, but like for who? I listed 3 client names, real clients, small enough that he would not recognize them. Mostly small businesses, some property investors. He nodded. And that pays okay? I told him it paid fine. We were comfortable. He looked around the office. The desk, the monitors, the filing cabinets. You have a lot of equipment for consulting. My heart rate picked up. I kept my voice level. I take it seriously. He laughed. I know you do. I am proud of you. He left. I sat there for 10 minutes, then I called Patricia. I told her what happened. She asked what I was worried about. I said I was worried David was starting to notice. She asked if that was a bad thing. I did not know yet. I hung up. I opened my laptop. I had a closing the next morning. A 6-unit apartment building, $1.2 million. I reviewed the documents until midnight. The second close call was worse. Elena invited me to lunch, just the 2 of us. She said she wanted to get to know me better, after all these years. We met at a restaurant downtown, white tablecloths, a wine wall that went floor to ceiling. She ordered a salad. I ordered the same. She asked how I was doing, how David and I were doing, if we were happy. I told her we were. She said, I worry about you too. David works so much, you are home alone. I explained that I worked too. I was busy. She waved her hand. I know your little consulting thing, but it is not the same as a real job, no structure, no stability. I took a sip of water. She continued. Richard and I were talking. We think maybe you should come work at the company. Officially, we could use someone with your skills. I asked what she meant. Well, you are good with numbers, right? We need someone in accounting, maybe office administration. Something steady. I thought about my 17 employees, my property management division, my development projects. I thanked her. I told her I appreciated the thought, but I liked what I was doing. She looked disappointed. I just think it would be good for you to be part of the family business, to contribute. The word hung there, contribute, as if I had not been contributing, as if I had been sitting around for 10 years. I smiled. I will think about it. She reached across the table. She patted my hand. You are a sweet girl. I just want to make sure you are taken care of. I was managing a portfolio worth $7.3 million. I finished my salad. I thanked her for lunch. In the car, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel. I did not start the engine. I just sat there. I thought about telling her, about explaining what I had built, about watching her face change, but I did not. I started the car. I drove to my next meeting. That night, David asked if I had a nice lunch with his mom. I told him it was lovely. He said, she really cares about you, you know? I knew. He said, she worries that you do not feel included, in the family, in the business. I asked what he told her. I told her you have your own thing, that you are happy. I was happy. I had built something remarkable. I had done it on my terms, but his family would never see it unless I made them see it. I was not ready yet. Ms. Evelyn called me 3 weeks later. She asked if I could stop by. She had something she wanted to talk about. I met her at her apartment, a small place. Neat. She had photographs everywhere, her late husband, her children, the building we had sold together. She made tea. We sat in her living room. She asked how the building was doing. I told her it was doing well, fully leased, strong tenants. Good cash flow. She smiled. I knew you would take care of it. She asked what else I was working on. I told her about some of my other properties, not all of them. Just enough. She listened. When I finished, she leaned forward. How many buildings do you own now? I hesitated. Then I told her. 11, she sat back. 11 buildings, I nodded. And your family knows this? I explained that my husband's family did not really understand what I did. They thought it was small, modest. She frowned. Why would you let them think that? I told her it was complicated. They had certain ideas about me, about my role. It was easier to just let them think what they wanted to think. She shook her head. Easier for who? I did not have an answer. She reached over and took my hand. Her skin was thin, her grip was strong. Listen to me. I spent 40 years letting people underestimate me, my husband's business partners, the bank managers, even my own son sometimes. You know what I learned? I waited. The longer you stay small in their eyes, the harder it is to grow. And one day you wake up and realize you have been living in a box you built yourself. I felt something in my chest, something tight. She squeezed my hand. Whatever you are building, do not shrink it to make other people comfortable. I thanked her. She asked if I wanted more tea. We sat there for another hour. We did not talk about buildings or money. We talked about her grandchildren, about the city, about nothing important. When I left, she hugged me at the door. She whispered, "You are going to do something remarkable, I know it." I cried in the car, just for a minute. Then I called Patricia. I told her I wanted to move forward with the asset protection documents, all of them. She asked if something happened. I told her no, I just wanted to be ready. She said she would have them ready by the end of the week. The third close call almost ended everything. Richard decided to have a financial planning meeting. He wanted to talk about retirement accounts. Estate planning, he wanted to make sure David and I were set up properly. We met at his accountant's office. A man named Jerry. He had been doing Richard's taxes for 30 years. Richard started by going over his own assets, the business, the properties, the investments. He had about $6 million in total net worth. Jerry took notes. Richard looked at David. "Now, what about you two? What do you have saved?" David looked at me. I had prepared for this. I had a story ready. A simplified version, consulting income. Some savings, a rental property or two. But sitting there looking at Jerry's notepad, I hesitated. If I lied and it came out later, it would be worse. If I told the truth, everything would change right now. David jumped in. "We are doing okay. We have some savings, a couple of rental properties." Richard nodded. Good, good. How much in the properties?" David looked at me again. I kept my voice steady. "A few $100,000 in equity." It was not a lie. It was just not the whole truth. Richard seemed satisfied. "That is smart. Real estate is good, safe." Jerry wrote something down. He asked about retirement accounts. David listed his 401k, about $90,000. Jerry looked at me. "And you?" I had an IRA. It had $412,000 in it. I told him I had a retirement account. I did not specify the amount. He asked for the number, for his records. David was looking at me. Richard was looking at me. I could feel the moment balancing on a knife edge. I gave him a number, 85,000. It was a lie. Jerry wrote it down. Richard nodded approvingly. "Not bad for someone who works from home." I smiled. The meeting continued. They talked about estate planning, about trusts, about making sure everything was protected. I sat there and listened. My hands were folded in my lap. I looked calm. Inside, my heart was racing. When we left, David was quiet in the car. Finally, he asked, "Do you actually have 85,000 in retirement?" I looked out the window. "Why?" "Because you have never mentioned it before." I told him I did not like to talk about money. It felt uncomfortable. He reached over and took my hand. "You do not have to hide things from me. Whatever you have, I am proud of you." I squeezed his hand back. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. David was asleep beside me. He trusted me. He loved me. And I had just lied to his father in front of him. I got up. I went to the office. I pulled out a folder. I started making a list. Everything I owned. Everything I had built. The real numbers. If I was going to do this, I needed to know exactly what I was protecting. The list took 3 hours to complete. When I finished, I looked at the total. $8.4 million. I had built an $8.4 million empire while they thought I was doing freelance spreadsheets. I sat back in my chair. I thought about Ms. Evelyn, about what she had said, about the box I was building. I thought about Patricia, about the documents she was drafting. I thought about Richard, about the way he had squeezed out those minority shareholders, about the way he dismissed everyone who did not fit his view of the world. I thought about the tests I needed to run. I needed to know for sure. I needed to confirm what I suspected. I needed evidence. I made 3 phone calls the next morning. The first was to Patricia. I told her I needed something specific. I needed to test a theory. She asked what kind of test. I explained. I needed to see if Richard would help me if I actually needed it, not hypothetically, actually needed it. She asked what I had in mind. I told her I was going to ask him for a loan, a small one, $20,000. I would tell him it was for a business opportunity. Time sensitive. I would offer to pay him back with interest. She was quiet for a moment. And if he says no, then I would have my answer. And if he says yes, then maybe I was wrong about him. She asked when I was planning to do this. I told her soon, within the week. She made me promise to record the conversation, audio at minimum, video if possible. I promised. The second call was to Ms. Evelyn. I told her what I was planning. I asked if she thought I was crazy. She laughed. She told me I was the sanest person she knew. She asked when I was doing it. I told her Sunday dinner. She wished me luck. The third call was to my business partner on the mixed-use development. I told him I might need to delay my next capital contribution by a week, just as a precaution. He asked if everything was okay. I told him it would be. Sunday dinner that week was at Richard and Alina's house. Pot roast. The same meal she had been making for 30 years. I waited until dessert. Apple pie. Alina made a big show of serving it. I took a bite. I set down my fork. I looked at Richard. "Can I ask you something? A business question." He perked up. He loved being asked for advice. "Of course, what is it?" I explained that I had a consulting client. They needed a bridge loan, $20,000 just for 60 days. They were good for it. The return would be significant, 12% interest. Richard asked why they needed a bridge loan. I told him their bank had delayed their line of credit, bureaucracy, but the opportunity could not wait. He asked why they did not just wait for the bank. I explained that the deal was time-sensitive. If they waited, they would lose it. David was watching me. He looked confused. He had never heard me talk about anything like this. Richard leaned back in his chair. "And what do you need?" I took a breath. "I need $20,000. I would front it to them. They would pay me back in 60 days with interest. I would give you half the return." Alina's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Bethany looked at Marcus. Richard folded his hands. "Why cannot you front it yourself?" I had prepared for this. "I have most of my cash tied up in other investments. I could liquidate, but it would cost me in penalties and fees. This way is cleaner." Richard was studying me. "What kind of investments?" I kept it vague. "Property, some index funds, the usual." He nodded slowly. "And you trust this client?" I told him I did. I had worked with them for 2 years. They had never missed a payment. He looked at Alina, then back at me. $20,000 is a lot of money. I agreed. I told him I understood if he was not comfortable, I would figure something else out. He cut another bite of pie. He chewed slowly. "Let me think about it." I nodded. I picked up my fork. My hand was steady. David put his hand on my knee under the table. We finished dessert. We talked about other things. The weather, Bethany's son, the company. When we were leaving, Richard walked us to the door. He pulled me aside. "This client of yours, what is their business?" I told him commercial real estate development. He frowned. "That is risky right now. Market is uncertain." I agreed that every investment had risk. He asked how long I had been doing this kind of thing. I told him a few years. It had been going well. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "I did not realize you were this involved with business." I told him I tried to stay busy. He patted my shoulder. "I will let you know about the loan. Give me a few days." In the car, David was quiet. Finally, he turned to me. "What was that about?" I told him the truth. A client needed a bridge loan. It was a good opportunity. He asked why I had never mentioned doing things like this before. I explained that I did not like to bore him with work details. He looked upset. "You are not boring me. I want to know what you are doing." I reached over and took his hand. I told him I was sorry. I would be more open. He squeezed my hand. "Are you doing okay?" "Financially?" I told him I was doing fine. He relaxed a little. "Okay, good, I just worry sometimes. You never talk about money." I promised to talk more. That night I reviewed the recording. I had my phone in my purse. The audio was clear. Patricia listened to it the next day. When it finished, she asked what I expected. I told her I expected him to say no. I expected him to lecture me about risk, about being more careful, about how I did not understand business the way he did. She asked if I thought he would actually help. I told her honestly. I did not know. Part of me hoped he would. Part of me hoped I was wrong about all of it. She told me to call her as soon as I heard back. Richard called 3 days later, Thursday afternoon. I was in a meeting with a contractor. I stepped outside to take it. "I have been thinking about your request." I waited. "I talked it over with Alina. We decided we are not comfortable with it." I asked why. "It is too risky." "You do not really know this client." "Not really. 2 years is not that long, and commercial real estate is volatile right now. I do not want to see you lose money." I told him I appreciated his concern. "I think you should pass on this opportunity. Wait for something safer." I thanked him for his time. He said, "And maybe you should think about diversifying. Index funds are good, safer than this kind of speculative lending." I told him I would think about it. He said, "We care about you. We do not want to see you get hurt." I told him I knew that. We hung up. I stood in the parking lot. The contractor was waiting inside. I had a decision to make about waterproofing. $28,000 either way. I thought about Richard's voice. Concerned, protective, certain that he knew better. I thought about the $20,000, the amount I had asked for. It was less than what he spent on Bethany's wedding flowers. It was less than his Christmas bonus to himself last year. It was less than he had paid for the car Alina drove, but he would not loan it to me, not for 60 days, not with guaranteed interest, not even to help me help a client. I went back inside, I approved the waterproofing. I used my own money. That night I called Patricia, I told her what happened. She asked how I felt. I told her I felt clear. She asked what I meant. I needed to know if he would help me if I actually needed it. Now I know. She was quiet for a moment. This changes things, I agreed. She asked if I was ready for the next test. I told her I needed a week. I needed to think about what the next test should be. She told me to take my time to be sure. I hung up. I sat in my office. I pulled out a notebook. I started writing. Test 2 needed to be different. Bigger. It needed to show me what Richard would do if he knew the truth. Not all of it, just a piece. I thought about it for 6 days. On the 7th day, I had a plan. I called Patricia. I told her what I wanted to do. She asked if I was absolutely sure. I was. Test 2 happened at the company's quarterly board meeting. Richard still held these even though it was just him, Alina, David, and the accountant, old habits. I had never attended one, but I asked David if I could sit in. I told him I was curious about how the business worked. He was surprised. He asked his dad. Richard said it was fine. They had nothing to hide. The meeting was in the conference room at the company office. Fluorescent lights, a table that seated 12, coffee and a carafe that looked older than me. Richard went through the numbers. Revenue, expenses, profit margins. The company had done $8.6 million that year. Profit was about $900,000. He talked about challenges, rising fuel costs, competition from larger logistics firms, the need to modernize technology. David presented an idea: warehouse management software. It would cost $120,000 to implement, but it would improve efficiency by an estimated 18%. Richard was skeptical. He asked if it was really necessary. David explained the benefits. Jerry, the accountant, backed him up. The ROI was solid. Richard agreed to think about it. Then he asked if there was any new business. I raised my hand. Everyone looked at me. Richard smiled. Yes. I told them I had a question about expansion strategy. Richard looked pleased. What would you like to know? I asked if they had ever considered geographic expansion, opening a second location. David looked interested. We have talked about it. Richard explained that it was expensive, risky. They would need to hire new staff, find new clients in a new market, build relationships from scratch. I nodded. I asked if they had run the numbers. Richard said they had looked at it. It did not make sense right now. I asked if I could see the analysis. Jerry looked uncomfortable. He said it was just preliminary, not formal. I pressed. I asked what markets they had considered. Richard named 2 cities, both within 3 hours, both mid-sized. I asked why those cities specifically. He explained: proximity, similar demographics, manageable. I asked if they had considered larger markets. Richard frowned. Larger markets are more competitive. I agreed. I asked if they had considered smaller markets with high growth potential. David leaned forward. Like what? I named 3 cities. I had researched them. I knew the logistics infrastructure. I knew the growth patterns. I knew the opportunity. Richard waved his hand. Those are too far, too small, not worth the investment. I asked how he knew. Experience. I have been doing this for 40 years. I pulled out a folder. I had prepared a 1-page analysis. Market size, growth rate, competition density, potential revenue. I slid it across the table. David picked it up. He read it. His eyes widened. Where did you get this? I told him I had put it together, just for fun. I was curious. Richard took the paper from David. He read it. His expression did not change. This is speculative. I agreed. I told him it was just an idea. Jerry was looking at the paper. These growth rates are impressive. Richard set the paper down. We are not expanding right now. We need to focus on improving our current operations. I nodded. I told him that made sense. But David was still looking at the analysis. Can I keep this? I told him, of course. The meeting wrapped up. We all stood. Richard pulled me aside. Where did you learn to do that? I asked what he meant. Market analysis. That paper you put together. I told him I picked things up from my consulting work. He looked at me for a long moment. You are smarter than I gave you credit for. I did not know what to say to that. He patted my arm. But business is more than just numbers on paper. It is relationships, trust, things you cannot quantify. I told him I understood. He smiled. Good, I am glad you are taking an interest. Maybe you will be helpful when David takes over. I thanked him. In the car, David was animated. He kept talking about the analysis, about the markets I had identified, about the potential. He asked how long it had taken me to put together. I told him a few hours. He looked at me. You are really good at this. I told him it was just research. He shook his head. No, it is more than that, you see things. Patterns, opportunities. I asked if he was going to pursue it. He said he wanted to, but his dad was set in his ways. It was hard to change his mind. I told him to keep trying. That night I called Patricia. I told her what happened. She asked what I learned. I told her I learned that Richard could acknowledge I was smart, but only in a way that kept me beneath him, only in a way that still made me the helper, the assistant, never the leader. She asked if that surprised me. It did not. She asked what the next test would be. I told her I needed to show him something he could not dismiss, something he could not minimize. I needed to create a situation where he had to choose between helping me or helping himself. She asked when. I told her I needed a month to set it up. She told me to be careful. I told her I would be. Test 3 took longer to prepare. It required moving pieces, timing, precision. I started by having conversations with David, casual, over dinner. While watching TV, I asked him what he wanted when he took over the company, what he would change, what he would keep the same. He said he wanted to modernize, invest in technology, expand carefully, build something that could last another 50 years. I asked what his dad thought about that. He said his dad was supportive, mostly, but he wanted to maintain control until the last possible moment. I asked when the official transition was happening. David said in 4 months. They had set a date. March 15th. His dad would retire. David would become president. They would have a party, announce it publicly. I asked if Richard was really ready to let go. David laughed. I think he's going to struggle with it, but he knows it is time. I kept listening. I kept asking questions. I kept learning. 2 weeks before the transition, I made my move. I scheduled a lunch with Richard, just the two of us. I told him I wanted to ask his advice about something. He agreed immediately. He loved being asked for advice. We met at the same restaurant where I had met Alina, the one with the wine wall. Richard ordered steak. I ordered salmon. He asked what I wanted to talk about. I told him I had an opportunity, a big one. A client wanted to sell their business. A small logistics company, annual revenue of about $3 million. They were retiring. They wanted to sell fast. Richard listened. I explained that the asking price was $1.8 million. But I thought I could get it for 1.6. The assets alone were worth more than that. The client list was solid. It was a good deal. Richard asked why they were selling so cheap. I told him the owner was sick. He wanted to retire now. His kids did not want the business. It was a motivated sale. Richard cut his steak. And what do you want from me? I took a breath. I want to buy it, but I need a partner, someone who knows the industry, someone who can help me run it. He stopped chewing. You want to buy a logistics company? I nodded. He set down his knife. Do you have $1.6 million? This was the moment. This was the test. I told him I had access to capital. I could raise it, but I wanted to do this with someone who understood the business. I wanted to do it with family. He leaned back. You want me to help you buy a competing logistics company? I clarified. Not competing, complementary, different market segment. We could refer business to each other. He was studying my face. Where did you get this capital you are talking about? I told him I had been saving, investing, building. I had more than people realized. He asked how much more. I told him enough. Enough to do this deal, enough to build something real. He was quiet for a long moment. Does David know about this? I told him not yet. I wanted to talk to Richard first, to see if it made sense. He picked up his knife again. He cut another piece of steak. I think you are getting ahead of yourself. I asked what he meant. You have been doing well with your little consulting business. That is great, but buying a company is different. It is complex. It is risky. You do not have the experience. I asked if he would consider partnering with me. He shook his head. I am retiring in 2 weeks. I am not starting a new venture. I asked if he would advise me then. He took a sip of wine. My advice is to pass on this. You do not know what you are getting into. I asked if he thought it was a bad deal. I think it is a deal you are not ready for. I asked how he would know if he had not seen the numbers. He smiled, a patient smile. Because I know you are smart, you are capable, but you are not a business owner, you are not a CEO, that is a different skill set. I felt something cold settle in my chest. I asked if he would at least look at the documentation. He finished his steak. There is no point. I am telling you now, this is not the right move for you. I thanked him for his time. He reached across the table. He patted my hand. I know you are trying to prove something, I get it, but you do not have to, you are doing fine, you have a nice life, a good husband, why complicate things? I pulled my hand back. I told him he was right, I would think about it. He paid for lunch. He walked me to my car. He hugged me goodbye. He said, trust me on this one. I sat in my car and watched him drive away. Then I called Patricia. I told her what happened. She asked if there really was a logistics company for sale. There was not. I had made it up. The whole thing was a test. She asked what I learned. I told her I learned that Richard would never see me as capable. No matter what I did, no matter what I built, he would always see me as the girl who needed his guidance. She asked if I was ready. I told her I had been ready for a long time. She asked what I wanted to do next. I told her I wanted to prepare for the anniversary party. The 50th anniversary of the company. It was in 62 days. She asked if that was enough time. I told her it had to be. She asked what I needed from her. I gave her a list, documents, verification, legal protections, everything in order. She told me she would have it ready. I hung up. I drove to Ms. Evelyn's apartment. She made tea. We sat in her living room. I told her everything. The tests, the responses, what I had learned. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked how I felt. I told her I felt sad. Part of me had hoped I was wrong. Part of me had hoped Richard would surprise me. She asked if I was going to move forward anyway. I told her I was. She asked if I was sure. I told her I had never been more sure of anything. She took my hand. She asked what I needed from her. I asked if she would come to the anniversary party. She smiled. She told me she would be honored. I went home. David was in the kitchen making dinner. He asked how lunch with his dad went. I told him it was good, informative. He asked what I had talked about. I told him business advice. Planning for the future. He smiled. He is great at that kind of stuff. I agreed. We ate dinner. We talked about other things, the transition, the party, what came next. That night I sat in my office. I pulled out a leather folder, dark brown. I had ordered it 3 weeks earlier. I started compiling documents. Everything I needed. Everything that would prove what I had built. I worked until 3 in the morning. When I finished, I looked at the folder. I had everything I needed. 62 days of evidence, 3 failed tests, and 1 phone call left to make. I called Patricia. It was late. She answered anyway. I told her I was ready. She asked if I had thought about what came after. I told her I had. I knew exactly what would happen. I knew what it would cost. I knew what I would lose. But I also knew what I would keep. She told me she would see me at the party. I thanked her. I hung up. I looked at the folder one more time. Then I put it in my purse where it would stay for the next 62 days until the moment I walked to that podium and handed it to Richard and watched his whole world change. The anniversary party was scheduled for Saturday, March 21st. 83 people. The Riverside Hotel, the same place where Bethany had gotten married. Eleanor had been planning it for 6 months. She kept asking me to help. I said yes to everything. Invitations. Seating charts. Centerpieces. I showed up. I took notes. I nodded. She told me which dress to wear, navy blue, modest. You want to look nice but not draw attention. I bought a different dress. Charcoal gray, well-tailored, expensive. I did not tell her. The week before the party, Richard made an announcement at Sunday dinner. He stood up. He tapped his glass. I have some news, something I have been working on for a while now. Everyone looked at him. He smiled. I have purchased the company from myself. Officially. The paperwork went through yesterday. I now own 100% of the equity outright. No minority shareholders, no complications, just me. Eleanor gasped. You did it, he nodded. I wanted it clean before I hand it to David. One owner to one owner. Simple. Bethany clapped. That is amazing, Dad. David looked confused. I thought you already owned it outright, after the buyouts. Richard waved his hand. There were some technical ownership structures, old corporate setup. I cleaned it all up. Now it is completely mine, and in 2 weeks it will be completely yours. I set down my water glass very carefully. David was smiling. Thank you, Dad. I do not know what to say. Richard looked around the table. At the party, I am going to make the announcement official. Transfer of ownership, new president, the whole thing. It is going to be a celebration. Eleanor was crying, happy tears. She reached over and squeezed Richard's hand. Bethany raised her glass. To Dad. And to the next 50 years. Everyone toasted. I lifted my glass. I took a sip. I did not say anything. Richard looked at me. You are quiet tonight. I told him I was just taking it all in. It was a big moment. He smiled. It is, and I am glad you will be part of it, part of the family business. I asked what he meant. Well, once David takes over, we will need all the help we can get. Maybe you can finally come work with us. Put those spreadsheet skills to good use. I told him that sounded great. David squeezed my hand under the table. That night, I called Patricia. I told her what Richard had announced. She was quiet for a moment. He consolidated everything right before the transfer, I confirmed. She asked if I knew why. I had a theory. I thought he wanted absolute control. I thought he wanted to make sure no one could question his decisions later. I thought he wanted the glory of handing over a company he owned completely. She agreed. She asked if I was still ready. I told her I was. She reminded me what was going to happen. Once I did this, there was no going back. Relationships would change, some would break completely. I told her I knew. She asked if I had told David. Not yet, I would tell him after. I could not risk him talking me out of it, or worse, warning his father. She told me to call her if I changed my mind. I would not change my mind. I hung up. I sat in my office. I opened the folder. I reviewed everything one more time. The deed to the building where the company was headquartered, purchased 18 months ago through an LLC. My LLC. Richard had been paying rent to me for a year and a half without knowing it. The contracts with 3 of his largest clients, negotiated through a consulting firm I had acquired. They had no idea the consultant who had improved their logistics strategy was the same person married to the son of their current provider. The loan documents showing I had purchased Richard's debt. Not all of it. Just enough. $240,000 in equipment financing. The bank had sold it to a collection of private investors 6 months ago. I was one of those investors. And the most important document, the one Patricia had verified 3 times, the corporate structure showing that the building, the clients, and the debt all intersected in a way that gave me leverage. Not ownership of the company, but leverage over the assets Richard thought he controlled. I had not built this to take the company. I had built it to protect myself, to make sure Richard could never dismiss me again, to make sure I had power. I just had not planned to use it at his anniversary party. But then he made his announcement. And he looked at me with that smile. That patient, condescending smile that said I would always be the helper, the assistant, the girl who needed guidance. And I decided it was time. The day of the party, I got ready slowly. I did my hair. I put on the gray dress. I looked at myself in the mirror. David came up behind me. "You look beautiful." I thanked him. He asked if I was nervous. I told him a little. Big night. He kissed my cheek. "It is going to be great. My dad is really happy. I am really happy." I told him I was happy for him. We drove to the hotel together. The parking lot was already full. We walked in holding hands. The event hall looked the same as it had at Bethany's wedding. White tablecloths, string quartet, flowers everywhere. Elena rushed over. She looked at my dress, her smile tightened. "Oh, that is different than what we discussed." I apologized. I told her the navy dress did not fit right. She recovered quickly. "Well, you look nice." Richard was holding court near the bar. People surrounded him, congratulating him, shaking his hand. He looked happy, proud. I found my seat. Table 3. David sat next to me. Bethany and Marcus were across from us. Ms. Evelyn was at table 7. I had put her there. Near the back, but with a clear view of the podium. Patricia was not coming. She was on standby, phone in hand, waiting for my text. The dinner started. Salad, chicken, roasted vegetables. I ate slowly. I listened to the conversations around me. People talking about the company, about Richard's legacy, about how lucky David was, about the future. Nobody talked to me. Nobody asked what I thought. I was decoration, background. After dinner, Richard stood up. He walked to the podium. Someone handed him a microphone. "Thank you all for being here. Tonight is very special to me." Everyone quieted down. 50 years ago, my father started this company in a garage. He had a truck, a few clients, a lot of hope. People nodded. Some had heard this story before. He built it into something real, something stable, and when he passed, he left it to me. I have tried to honor his legacy every day since. Elena was crying. She always cried. Tonight, I am honored to announce that I am passing that legacy to my son. David will take over as president effective immediately. The company is his now. Applause, loud, sustained. David stood up. He looked surprised. "Dad, I thought we were announcing this next week." Richard smiled. "I wanted to do it here, in front of everyone who matters. This is your moment." More applause. David walked to the podium. He hugged his father. Richard handed him the microphone. David started to speak. He thanked his father. He thanked the employees. He talked about the future. About growth. About modernization. I watched Richard. He was beaming. He looked at Elena. She was still crying. Then Richard took the microphone back. "One more thing, I have a surprise." David looked confused. Richard reached into his jacket. He pulled out an envelope. "I did not just hand you the company, I made sure it was perfect first. Clean ownership, no complications, no debt." He opened the envelope. He pulled out a document. "This is the deed to the building, our headquarters, paid in full. No mortgage, it is yours now." David's eyes widened. "Dad, you did not have to." Richard held up his hand. I wanted you to start with a clean slate. He handed the document to David. I stood up. Everyone turned to look at me. I walked to the podium. Slowly, calmly, David looked concerned. Honey, what are you doing? I reached into my purse. I pulled out the leather folder. I handed it to Richard. He took it. He looked confused. What is this? Open it. He opened the folder. He pulled out the first document. He read it. His face changed. What is this? I kept my voice level. That is the deed to the building, the actual deed. The one you just showed David is a copy of a previous deed before the sale. He looked at the paper, then at me. What are you talking about? I bought the building 18 months ago. You have been paying rent to my LLC ever since. That building is not yours to give David. It is mine. David stepped closer. What? Richard's hand was shaking slightly. He looked at David, then back at me. This is a mistake, some kind of clerical error. I pulled out my phone. I showed him the bank statements, 18 months of rental payments, deposited into an account under my company name. You signed the lease. Your accountant processed the payments. You just did not look at who you were paying. Bethany stood up from her table. This does not make any sense. I looked at her. Then back at Richard. There is more. Turn to the next page. He did. His hand was shaking more now. Those are contracts with Feldman Logistics, with Morrison Distribution, with Green Supply, 3 of your largest clients. They are leaving when their current contracts expire. They are signing with a different provider. Richard looked up. Who? Me. Well, technically a consulting firm I own. We have been working with them for 2 years, improving their efficiency, reducing costs. They do not know I am connected to you. David's voice was quiet. How is that possible? I turned to him. I have been building a business for 12 years. You thought it was small. It is not small. Richard's voice rose. You cannot do this. Those clients are ours. We have relationships. You have relationships. They have better offers. Marcus stood up. He looked like he wanted to say something. Bethany put her hand on his arm. He sat back down. I pulled another document from the folder. This is the last thing. You took out equipment financing 2 years ago, $240,000. The bank sold that loan 6 months ago. I bought it. Richard stared at the paper. You bought my debt? Part of it, enough. He looked around the room. People were watching. Everyone was watching. His face was red. Why would you do this? Because 3 weeks ago you told me I was not ready to buy a business. You told me I did not have the experience. You told me to trust you. His voice dropped. This was about that lunch? No, this was about 10 years of you treating me like I was invisible, like I was incapable, like I would never be anything more than David's wife. Alina stood up. She walked toward the podium. You are doing this here, at his party, in front of everyone? I looked at her. He made an announcement. I am making one too. She turned to David. Are you going to let her do this? David was staring at me. Did you really buy all of this? I told him yes. How? I built a company. I have been building it since before we got married. I have 17 employees. I own 14 properties. I manage a portfolio worth $11.3 million. The number hung in the air. Bethany's voice was sharp. That is not possible. I pulled out the last document. This is a financial statement, verified by my accountant. You can check it. I set it on the podium. David picked it up. He read it. His hands were trembling. $11 million. 11.3, as of last month. Richard's voice was hoarse. You have been lying to us for 12 years? I have not been lying. I just have not been telling you everything. You never asked. You never wanted to know. He pointed at the documents. This is manipulation. He stopped. He looked around the room. This is vindictive. This is business. You taught me that. Remember, business is relationships, trust, things you cannot quantify. Alina's voice broke. How could you do this to him? After everything he has done for you? I turned to her. What has he done for me? Tell me specifically. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. I looked at Richard. You asked me for help 20 times. I said yes every time. You asked me to make spreadsheets, set up tables, pick up pies. I did it every single time. Richard's jaw was tight. We treated you like family. You treated me like help. David stepped between us. Stop, both of you. You can figure this out. I looked at him. There is nothing to figure out. I own the building. I have the clients. I hold the debt. These are facts. Richard's voice was louder now. You think you can just take everything I built? I am not taking anything. I am showing you what I built while you assumed I was doing nothing. Ms. Evelyn was watching from table 7. She was not smiling, but she nodded once. A man in a suit stood up from table 4. I did not know him. He walked over to Richard. He spoke quietly. I think we should discuss this in private. Richard ignored him. He looked at David. This is your wife. You need to control this situation. David's face changed. Control? Richard gestured at me. She is out of control. She is making a scene. You need to handle this. David looked at his father for a long moment. Then he looked at me. Did you really build all of this? I told him yes. And you never told me? I told you I was working. I told you I had clients. You never asked for details. Because I thought. He stopped. I do not know what I thought. Richard cut in. I am not going to stand here and be humiliated by someone who, I interrupted. By someone who what? Say it. He stopped. You were going to say by someone who does not know what they are doing, by someone who does not understand business, by someone who is not capable. That is what you were going to say. His silence was an answer. I picked up the folder. I am not asking for your approval. I am not asking for your permission. I am telling you how things are now. Elinor's voice was desperate. What do you want? Money? Is that what this is about? I do not want your money. I have my own. Then what do you want? I want you to see me. Actually see me, not the version you invented. The real me? Richard's voice was cold. I see you. I see someone who has been scheming behind our backs for years. Someone who pretended to be one thing while being another. I have been exactly who I am. You just decided I was something else, and you never questioned it, not once. Bethany stood up again. This is insane. You are insane. I looked at her. I am the same person I was an hour ago. The only thing that changed is now you know. Marcus pulled Bethany back down. David's voice was quiet. What happens now? I looked at him. That depends. The building lease is up for renewal in 60 days. I can renew it at the current rate, or I can triple it, or I cannot renew it at all. Richard stepped forward. You would not. Why not? You bought out minority shareholders for half of what they deserved. You squeezed people who helped you build this company. Why should I be different? Because you are family. Am I? Because an hour ago you told David I could help with the books once he took over. That does not sound like family. That sounds like an employee you do not have to pay. Elinor was crying now, real crying, not happy tears. You are destroying him. You are destroying this family. I am not destroying anything. I am just not pretending anymore. A woman from table 8 stood up. She walked over. She was older, maybe 70. I recognized her from somewhere but could not place it. She spoke directly to Richard. I think you should listen to her. Richard turned. Excuse me? I was one of the minority shareholders. You bought me out 3 years ago, 50 cents on the dollar. I needed the money. My husband was sick. You knew that. You used it. Richard's face changed. That was business. So is this. She looked at me. Good for you. She walked back to her table. Richard looked around the room. People were watching, judging. Some looked uncomfortable. Some looked fascinated. Nobody looked away. He turned back to me. What do you want from me? I want you to admit that you were wrong about me. Wrong about what? Everything. That I was capable, that I was smart, that I could build something. That I was more than just David's wife. He looked at the documents on the podium, at the numbers, at the proof. I never said you were not capable. You never said I was. He opened his mouth, closed it. David's voice was raw. Dad, just say it. Richard looked at his son. Say what? Say she was right? Say you underestimated her. Just say it. Richard's hands were shaking. He looked at me. You ambushed me at my anniversary party. In front of everyone I know. You announced you bought the company at Sunday dinner. In front of everyone I know, you made decisions about my future without asking me. You have been doing it for 12 years. Elinor tried one more time. Please, can we just talk about this privately? As a family? I shook my head. You made this public. When you invited 83 people to watch Richard hand over his empire, this is just as public. Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. Built that company from nothing. I know, and it is impressive. I have never said otherwise, but that does not mean you get to decide what I am worth. He looked at the documents again. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. David put his hand on his father's shoulder. Dad, she is right. You did underestimate her. We all did. Richard pulled away. You are taking her side? I am not taking sides. I am stating facts. Richard looked at me, then at David, then at Elinor. I need a minute. He walked off the podium. He walked out of the event hall. Elinor followed him. The room was silent. David stood there. He looked at me. $11.3 million? I nodded. And you never told me? I tried. You never heard it. You heard what you expected to hear. He looked hurt. That is not fair. Maybe not, but it is true. Bethany was still at her table. She was staring at me. Marcus whispered something to her. She shook her head. Ms. Evelyn stood up. She walked to the podium. She looked at me. You did good. I thanked her. She looked at David. Your wife is remarkable. I hope you know that. David did not respond. Ms. Evelyn walked back to her table. She picked up her purse. She left. People started leaving. Not everyone, but enough. Tables 2, 5, and 8 emptied completely. The woman who had been a minority shareholder stopped by the podium on her way out. She handed me a business card. "If you ever need anything, call me." I thanked her. Patricia texted me. "Are you okay?" I texted back. "Yes," she sent another message. "Documents are filed, official as of 20 minutes ago." I put my phone away. David was still standing there. "What documents?" I told him the asset protection filings. Legal separation of my business entities from any marital property claims. Patricia had filed them that afternoon. He looked like I had hit him. "You think I would try to take your business?" "I do not know what you would try to do." I needed to protect myself. From me? From anyone who might try to claim I did not build this on my own. He sat down in the nearest chair. He put his head in his hands. I wanted to comfort him. I wanted to tell him it would be okay. But I did not know if it would be. Richard came back. Eleanor was with him. His face was different, harder. "I want you out of the building in 30 days. I reminded him he did not own the building. "I want the company out. We will find a new location." I told him that was his choice. "And I am terminating the lease, effective immediately." I explained that was not how leases worked. There was a termination clause, 90 days notice, penalties. He did not care, he would pay the penalties. I told him that was fine. He looked at David. "Are you coming?" David did not move. "David, we are leaving." David looked up. "I need to talk to my wife." Richard's voice was sharp. "That woman is not your wife anymore." David stood up. "Yes, she is." Richard stared at him. Then he turned and walked out. Eleanor hesitated. She looked at me, then at David. Then she followed Richard. Bethany and Marcus left without saying anything. David and I stood alone in the event hall. The string quartet had stopped playing. The staff was clearing tables. He looked at me. "Why did you wait so long?" I told him I was not waiting. I was building. There is a difference. "But why did you not tell me? Would you have believed me?" He started to answer, then stopped. "I do not know." "Exactly." He ran his hands through his hair. "What happens now?" I told him that depended on him. "On me? I can renew the lease at the current rate. I can even reduce it, but only if your father acknowledges what I built, what I am capable of. I need that from him. And if he does not, then the company finds a new building, and I find new tenants. That will destroy him. No, it will inconvenience him. There is a difference." David looked at the empty room. "Do not know if I can fix this." I told him he did not have to fix it. He just had to decide what he believed. "About what?" "About me, about who I am, about whether you can be married to someone your father does not approve of." He looked at me for a long moment. "I love you, I know, but I do not know if I can do this, be in the middle." I told him he was not in the middle, he was choosing. He asked if I would give him time. I told him yes, but not forever. He nodded. He kissed my forehead, then he left. I stood in the empty event hall. I looked at the podium, at the folder, at the documents that had just changed everything. I picked up my purse, I walked out. In the parking lot, my phone rang. It was Patricia. She asked how it went. I told her it went exactly how I thought it would. She asked if I was okay. I told her I would be. She reminded me what we had filed, what was protected, what could not be touched. I thanked her. I hung up. I got in my car. I sat there for a minute, then I drove home. David called me the next morning, early, 7:15. I was already up. I had been up since 5:30. He asked if we could meet, not at the house, somewhere neutral. We met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind with small tables and too much noise. He was already there when I arrived. He looked like he had not slept. I sat down across from him. He did not say anything for a minute. Then, "My dad wants to sue you." I asked on what grounds. Fraud, deception, I do not know. Talked to a lawyer last night. I told him that was his choice. My attorney was ready. He looked down at his coffee. "Is there anything else, anything you have not told me yet?" I thought about it. "No, you know everything now. Everything, everything that matters." He was quiet again. Then, I talked to the accountant, Jerry. I asked him about the building, about the lease. He confirmed it, you really do own it. I reminded him I would not lie about something that easy to verify. I know, I needed to hear it from someone else. I waited, he looked up. "My dad is saying you planned this, that you married me to get access to the company, to take it down from the inside." I asked if he believed that. "I do not know what I believe anymore." I stood up. "Then I think we are done here." He reached across the table. He grabbed my hand. "Wait, please." I sat back down. "I do not believe that. I do not think you married me for the company. But I also do not understand why you hid everything from me." I explained that I did not hide it. I told him I was working. I told him I had clients. I told him I was investing. He heard what he wanted to hear. "But $11 million. How do I not notice my wife building an $11 million business?" "Because you were not looking. You were focused on the family company, on your dad's approval. You saw me the way he saw me." He pulled his hand back. That is not fair. Maybe not, but you asked. He drank his coffee. It had to be cold by now. What do you want from me? I told him I wanted him to decide. His family or his wife, not both, not anymore. That is not a fair choice. It is the only choice. Your father will never accept me now, you know that. He did not argue. I stood up again. I am going home. When you decide, call me. He nodded. I left. In the parking lot, Patricia called. She asked if I had time to meet. There was something we needed to discuss. I drove to her office. She was waiting with a folder, a thick one. She set it on the table between us. Richard's attorney contacted me this morning. They are threatening to sue. I asked for what? Everything: fraud, tortious interference, breach of fiduciary duty. They are throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. I asked what she thought. I think they have no case. You bought the building legally. You negotiated the client contracts through a legitimate firm. You purchased the debt through a standard transaction. Everything was above board. I asked if there was any risk. She leaned back. There is always risk, but in this case, minimal. They would have to prove you acted in bad faith, that you concealed your business for the specific purpose of harming theirs, which you did not. I asked what we should do. Let them file, we respond, we win, and then we countersue for frivolous litigation. I told her to do it. She pulled out another document. There is something else, the lease termination. Richard sent notice this morning, 90 days plus penalties. I asked how much. $48,000. I told her to send the invoice. She smiled. Already done. I went home. The house was quiet. David's car was not in the driveway. I made coffee. I sat in the office. I looked at the spreadsheets, the numbers that had taken 12 years to build. Ms. Evelyn called that afternoon. She asked how I was holding up. I told her I was okay. Tired, but okay. She asked if I had heard from David. Not since that morning. She told me to give him time. Men process slowly, especially when their entire worldview has been challenged. I asked if she thought he would come around. I do not know, but I know you will be fine either way. I thanked her. She asked if I needed anything: company, distraction, a witness if I had to go back and face them again. I told her I might take her up on that. She told me to call any time. 3 days later, Richard's attorney filed the lawsuit. Patricia received it by courier. She called me immediately. They filed. I asked what it said. She read me the key parts: fraud, intentional interference with business relationships, breach of the duty of good faith and fair dealing in the context of a family relationship. I asked about the last one. It is creative, probably will not survive a motion to dismiss, but it shows they are desperate. I asked what happened next. We respond. We file our own motion to dismiss. And we counterclaim. I told her to proceed. She asked if I was sure. I was sure. The next week was quiet. David stayed with his parents. He texted once. He said he needed space to think. I told him to take all the time he needed. I focused on work. I had properties to manage, tenants to deal with, a business to run. One of the clients from Richard's company called me, Feldman Logistics. The owner wanted to meet. We met at his office. He was in his 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes. He asked me directly, "Are you the consultant we have been working with?" I told him yes. He leaned back in his chair. I heard about the party, about what happened. I did not respond. I want you to know something. We are not leaving because of family drama. We are leaving because you are better. Your recommendations saved us $400,000 last year alone. The relationship with Richard's company is fine, but you are exceptional. I thanked him. He asked if I had capacity to take on more work. He had colleagues who could use someone like me. I told him to send them my way. He did. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 new clients, all referrals from Feldman. Patricia called me 4 weeks after the lawsuit was filed. We got the motion to dismiss granted. I asked which parts. All of it. The judge threw out every claim, and he was not polite about it. I asked what that meant. It means Richard's attorney did not do their homework. The judge called the fiduciary duty claim frivolous. He suggested they reconsider before filing anything else. I asked about the counterclaim. Still pending, but we have a strong case. They filed a baseless lawsuit. We can recover attorney fees, possibly more. I told her to push forward. She asked if I wanted to settle. I asked what they were offering. Nothing yet, but I suspect they will soon. I told her I would think about it. David called me that night, first time in 28 days. He asked if we could talk, in person. We met at the house. House? He let himself in. He still had his key. We sat in the living room, the same room where we had talked about the future hundreds of times before. He started. I have been thinking a lot. I waited. My dad is not going to change. He is convinced you manipulated everyone, that you planned this from the beginning. I asked if he believed that. No, but he is my father, and I cannot just cut him off. I told him I understood. But I also cannot pretend you are not who you are. I saw the business, I saw the numbers. You built something incredible, and I missed it. I missed all of it because I was not paying attention. I told him it was not entirely his fault. I could have been more direct. He shook his head. No, you told me, I just did not listen. I heard consulting and I thought small. I assumed, just like my dad did. We sat in silence for a minute. Then he asked, what do you want to happen now? I told him I wanted him to be happy. Whatever that looked like. That is not an answer, I corrected myself. I want you to choose me, not because you have to, not because it is the right thing to do, but because you actually see me now, all of me, and you still want this. He looked at me. I do see you, and it is terrifying. I asked why. Because you do not need me, you never did. You built an empire while I thought you were folding laundry. I told him I did need him, just not financially. Then why stay married to me? Because I love you. Because when you are not trying to please your father, you are kind, you are good, you see the best in people. Those are things I cannot build with a business plan. He looked away. My dad said if I stay with you, I am choosing against the family. I asked what he said. I told him that you are my family too. Something in my chest loosened. He continued. But I also told him I am not getting in the middle of this. The lawsuit, the business, whatever happens between you two, I am staying out of it. I told him that was fair. Is it enough? I told him it was a start. He moved back in that night. We did not talk about his father. We did not talk about the business. We just existed in the same space again. 2 weeks later, Richard's attorney called Patricia with a settlement offer. They would drop the counterclaim if I agreed to drop mine. No money, no admission of fault, just mutual release. Patricia asked what I wanted to do. I told her to accept. I did not need their money. I did not need their admission. I just needed them to leave me alone. She processed the paperwork. It was done within a week. I sent Richard one email, short, professional. The building lease is up for renewal in 37 days. Current rate is $6,000 per month. I am willing to renew at the same rate for another 2 years. Let me know by the end of the month. He responded 3 days later. One sentence. We will be moving to a new location. I forwarded the email to my property manager. I told her to start looking for new tenants. She found a tech startup within 2 weeks. They signed a 3-year lease at $8,000 per month. I never heard from Richard again. Eleanor called once. 3 months after the party. She asked if we could have lunch. I agreed. We met at a different restaurant. She looked older, tired. She did not apologize. She did not ask me to apologize. She just asked if David was okay. I told her he was. She asked if we were okay. I told her we were figuring it out. She nodded. Richard will not talk about you. He pretends you do not exist. I told her that was probably easier for him. She looked at me. Did you really build all of that yourself? I told her yes. I do not understand how we missed it. I explained that she saw what she expected to see. I was the daughter-in-law who set tables and picked up pies. Anything outside of that did not fit the picture. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I think I owe you an apology. I told her she did not owe me anything. Yes, I do. I underestimated you. We all did. I accepted the apology. She asked if I would ever forgive Richard. I told her that was not the right question. The question was whether Richard would ever see me as an equal, and I did not think he would. She did not argue. We finished lunch. She paid. She hugged me at the door. Take care of my son? I told her I would. Bethany never called. I saw her once at the grocery store 6 months later. She looked at me. I looked at her. Neither of us said anything. She turned her cart and walked the other way. I heard through David that she and Richard had a falling out, something about money, about expectations. He had promised her something and then changed his mind. David did not give me details. He said he was staying out of it. Ms. Evelyn and I had lunch once a month. She asked about the business, about David, about whether I was happy. I told her I was, happier than I had been in years. She asked why. Because I am not pretending anymore. She smiled. Good, that was always exhausting to watch. The woman who had been a minority shareholder called me 8 months after the party. She said she had a business opportunity, a small logistics company that needed restructuring. She thought I might be interested. I told her to send me the details. I reviewed them. The company was solid. Good bones, bad management. It would take work. But it was viable. I bought it for $970,000. I hired a CEO to run it, someone who knew the industry, someone who understood operations. The company turned profitable within 18 months. I never told Richard, but he found out anyway. Someone told him, maybe Bethany, maybe Eleanor, maybe just industry gossip. He did not contact me, but David said his father mentioned it once. He said I was making a mistake, that I did not know what I was doing. David told him I seemed to be doing fine. Richard did not respond. 2 years after the party, David took over the family company fully. Richard retired completely. He and Alina moved to a smaller house, something more manageable. David modernized the business. He implemented the warehouse management software. He expanded into 2 new markets. Revenue grew by 31% in the first year. He did it without his father's input. Richard had opinions. David listened politely. Then he did what he thought was right. I was proud of him. 3 years after the party, I sold 4 of my properties. I consolidated. I focused on commercial real estate, on consulting, on the logistics company I had purchased. My portfolio was worth $18.7 million. David knew the exact number. I showed him the statements every quarter. He asked questions. He understood now. One night, he asked me why I had waited so long to tell everyone. I explained that I had not been waiting. I had been building. There is a difference. He asked if I would do it differently if I could go back. I thought about it. Maybe I might have told you sooner, but the rest? No, I needed to build it on my terms, without anyone's permission. He asked if I regretted the party, the confrontation. I told him no. Your father needed to see me, actually see me, not the version he invented, and the only way to make him look was to make it impossible to look away. He asked if it worked. I told him I did not know. Richard still did not talk to me. He still acted like I did not exist. But you exist anyway, I agreed. I exist anyway. We were sitting on the back porch, the house we had fixed up together 12 years ago. The kitchen cabinets closed properly now. The water heater did not make any noise. David reached over and took my hand. I am sorry I did not see you sooner. I told him he saw me now. That was enough. Ms. Evelyn passed away 4 years after the party. Peacefully. Her sleep. I went to the funeral. I sat in the back. Her children were there, the ones from California. They did not know who I was. After the service, her daughter approached me. She asked if I had known her mother. I told her yes. She had been a friend. The daughter asked how they had met. I explained that her mother had sold me a building, that we had stayed in touch. The daughter smiled. She talked about you. She said you were going to do something remarkable. I told her that was kind. She meant it. She said you reminded her of herself. I thanked her. The daughter asked if I wanted anything from the estate, a keepsake. I told her I already had what I needed. The memory of her mother telling me not to stay small. The daughter hugged me. She would have been proud. I believed her. 5 years after the party, my business employed 43 people. I had offices in 2 cities. I consulted for companies doing a combined $200 million in annual revenue. David's company was doing well too. $15 million in revenue. Stable, growing. We were not rich by billionaire standards, but we were comfortable, secure, independent. One Sunday, David asked if I wanted to have dinner with his parents. I asked why. Because my mom keeps asking, because it has been 5 years, because maybe it is time. I asked if his father wanted me there. I did not ask him. I am asking you. I told him I would think about it. I called Patricia. I asked her opinion. She laughed. You are asking me if you should have dinner with your in-laws. I explained the situation. She asked what I was afraid of. I told her I was not afraid. I just did not know if it would change anything. Then why go? Because David asked. And because maybe Alina deserves a chance to know me, the real me. Patricia told me to do what felt right. I agreed to the dinner. We met at a restaurant, neutral territory. Alina cried when she saw me, happy tears this time. Richard shook my hand. Formal. Brief, we sat down. We ordered food. The conversation was stilted at first, whether safe topics. Then Alina asked about my business, genuinely asked. She wanted to know. I told her about the properties, the consulting, the logistics company. She listened. She asked follow-up questions. Richard did not say much. He ate his steak. He drank his wine. Near the end of the meal, he looked at me. David tells me you are doing well. I confirmed that I was. Good. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, just good. But he said it without hostility, without dismissal. It was not much, but it was something. I never expected Richard to see me the way I needed him to. I stopped waiting for his approval years ago, but David saw me. Ms. Evelyn had seen me. My clients saw me. My employees saw me. That was enough. Some people still think I went too far, that I should have handled it privately, that I humiliated Richard in front of everyone he knew. Others say I did not go far enough. That I should have taken the company, that I should have destroyed him completely. I did what I needed to do. I built something. I protected it. And when someone tried to make me small, I showed them exactly how big I had become. I do not regret it. My daughter asked me last week if Grandpa Richard was coming to her birthday party. She is 7 now. David and I had her 3 years after the party. I told her grandpa and grandma were busy. Maybe next time. She said okay and went back to drawing. She does not know the story. Not yet, maybe one day when she is older. For now, she just knows that her mom runs a business, that people call me for advice, that I work hard. She draws pictures of office buildings. She says she wants to be like me when she grows up. I tell her she can be anything she wants. As long as she does not let anyone tell her she is not capable, as long as she builds what she wants to build, as long as she does not make herself small to make other people comfortable. She nods. She does not fully understand yet, but she will. I genuinely want to know what you think. Was I wrong to confront him publicly? Should I have just walked away and built my life without ever showing them what I was capable of? Or did they need to see it? Tell me in the comments.